In this video, I want to share some thoughts with you around one of the really big problems that exists right now around the world, and that is inflation. Now, maybe you're impacted by this, maybe you know somebody who is, but many people are feeling the pinch right now financially. The cost of living has gone up. People are starting to lose hope. And I think it's really important when we have situations like this, not to feel like we're hopeless and we have no impact or no control. You and I always have the ability to educate ourselves, to, I guess, move in a different direction, to empower ourselves with the right information. There are always solutions for every crisis, for every situation. We just need to be open enough to be able to think outside the box, to be able to educate ourselves, to feel empowered, to feel like we have the answers, we have some solutions, and to move forward in a positive way, whatever that might be, and however small those steps might be. So in this video, I just want to give you a little bit of context around this topic of inflation, how it is that we got to be here, why it's actually happening, and how it is that you should be thinking about the future and what it is that you can do to protect your purchasing power, or even your wealth, anything that you may have, moving forward. Because there's no doubt that we're living in very changing times, and how things are going to look in 2, 3, and 5 years from now is probably a lot different to what it is now. So the first thing to understand, or for us to talk about, is what is inflation? Well, if you Google or listen to a politician or a representative of the central bank in Australia, it is the Reserve Bank of Australia. In America, is the Fed, and you listen to their the way that they talk. Essentially, what you discover is that they have a mandate, which is to basically control the price of things, and number two, to ensure that there is employment. In other words, everybody has a job. And that's basically their role. And they do it through two instruments. One is increasing interest rates, and number two is decreasing interest rates. But there is a third way that, or third method that has become quite prevalent, certainly since the global financial crisis, and that is this area called quantitative easing, also known as money printing. So I'll get to that in a moment and the implications of that. But the first thing for us to realize is that inflation, by definition, is not what we're told. We are led to believe that over the course of time, inflation is a natural phenomenon that whereby the prices just gradually increase to the tune of 3, 4, maybe even 5% per year. But it's not enough for us really to notice. If the price of eggs goes from $6 to $6.30 one year, and then $6.80 or $7 the next year, we don't really notice that. And when we add to that the fact that generally our wages or our income tends to go up by 5, 6, 7, 8, 10% a year, we take that into account. We certainly don't notice the price of things going up at a steady, relatively moderate rate. But everything changed in 2020. And that's really what I want to sort of talk about in terms of the timeline here today, because up until that point, we didn't have really any real reason to be concerned. If you wanted to buy a home, you could save up over a period of time, and typically you were able to find yourself a moderate home to save a deposit for and get into the housing market. And for many, that is still the great Australian dream, is to be able to get into the housing market, to bed your roots down, and to be able to raise a family perhaps, but at least to have a roof over your head and a stable environment, relatively safe neighborhood, and just get on and live your life. But now we have a situation where so many people are now locked out of the housing market. We've got all of this immigration happening that none of us voted for. So all of these people coming in that we're told because we need the skills in this country, and yet average Australians are really doing it tough and struggling at the same time. Rents are going up like never before. People are starting to lose hope that they won't be able to ever get out of the rental market. They'll always have to rent. They won't be able to play or partake in the great Australian dream. And so all of this is an impact or impacted by this thing called inflation. So even though they'll tell us that inflation historically has been a natural phenomenon, again, where it just goes up, prices go up by a small amount every single year, the reality is that the true definition of inflation is monetary expansion. And one of the great economists of recent generations is a gentleman by the name of Milton Friedman. And he defined inflation as inflation is taxation without legislation. Inflation is taxation without legislation. So in other words, the government in coordination with the central banks have the power to be able to increase the money supply to create inflation through monetary expansion without any voting from the people, without any laws put into place. And then essentially what that does is that taxes the people by stealth without them even noticing it. So if you think about it, every time you go to work and you earn an income or you run your business and you generate revenue, as soon as the government increases the money supply, the value of the dollars that you have earned becomes diluted. Now, this phenomenon is known as debasement, and it's been going on for centuries, way back in ancient times and all through the eras where we used different barterable items as mediums of exchange. Even in ancient Egypt, they used to take gold coins and scratch little bits off so that they could maintain some shards of gold over here, some of their purchasing power, and dilute the purchasing power over there. But the reality is today, it's done in a far more unnoticeable way, and that is through this monetary expansion mechanism, which every time they do that and create extra liquidity in the system, it is just diluting the purchasing power of the average citizen. Now, having said that, there is a whole faction of society that actually benefits from this phenomenon. There's a faction of society that actually benefits from inflation, that benefits from monetary expansion and money printing, and that is people who own assets. Now, anybody who has owned assets since 2020, since the great health crisis, and has been a part of this massive liquidity injection situation that's been going on around the world, their wealth has gone up exponentially. The prices of their assets, their homes, have doubled and even tripled in some cases. And so you won't hear those people complaining about this situation. But the problem is that it's creating an enormous wealth gap, an enormous wealth divide. No longer is a home somewhere for people to lay down their roots, for people to be able to create some stability in their life, to raise a family, to have a couple of kids. It's not like that anymore. Now, housing is seen as a way to generate wealth, to make money. And there are certain policies that are in place that have, I guess, have enabled that situation to become even more pronounced. Such as the capital gains tax concession for investors, the fact that your own principal place of residence is a tax-free event if you go to sell it. So any money you make on your own personal home, there's no tax to pay on that. And so there's a faction of society, like I said, who will benefit substantially from money printing. Every time they inject liquidity into the system, that liquidity needs somewhere to find a home. And typically it finds it in real estate, the stock market, and in recent times, the crypto market as well. And so if you don't have assets, if you're, just getting about your life and you've got some savings in the bank, or with inflation, you don't have any savings, you're just doing what you can just to get by because the cost of living has gone up, you can see how this wealth gap really starts to expand at a great rate of knots. And that's really the situation that we have right now. Never before in my lifetime have I noticed so many people struggling. Every time you turn on social media or the news, you're seeing these huge lines of people lining up just to get a rental property. We have immigration, mass immigration happening, and yet people who are already in this country, Australian citizens, are struggling just to function, just to survive. And so the whole situation right now, as a result of inflation, is becoming a lot more obvious. It's just that most people, unfortunately, they're not using it as a red flag to go and do some study, to learn about money, to learn about the history of money, how it is that we got to this point, to learn that, you know, we weren't meant to be off the gold standard. The currency that we have is a fiat currency, which essentially means by decree. Fiat means by decree, which basically means that we're putting all our faith and trust in the government and the central banks to protect our wealth. And yet what they're doing is diluting our wealth, diluting our purchasing power. And because there's no checks and balances, because this currency is no longer protected by or backed by anything tangible, i.e., like it once was, gold, when we had the gold standard. So now we're at the whim um, of these policies. And so this is the time where people have to start getting educated. This is the time where people have to start being really proactive with protecting their wealth, protecting their assets, protecting their purchasing power. This is the time where any spare change or savings that you have, you need to consider seriously where you're placing those savings in order to not only protect what you have, but also to keep up with inflation, which by all accounts is only going to accelerate and get worse from here. Because the reality is that these policies that are in place, they're not going to change because they only have the only options they have is either to increase liquidity, increase interest rates, or lower interest rates. And if they lower interest rates now, then the reality is that it's just going to drive up asset prices even more, which means that people who are out of the housing market, they're never going to get in because the price is going to become even more further out from where they are now. Whereas if they increase interest rates, everybody who's got a mortgage, who's got a significant debt, then they're going to be pushed over the cliff because they can't, not only are they struggling already just to maintain their mortgage and their groceries and their school fees and their car payments and their cost of living, but now they're going to have to be paying more on their mortgage, which is it's going to be breaking point for many, many families. And so now is the time to really take stock of where you are, to think about what it is that you can do to educate yourself, protect your purchasing power, and to empower yourself to move forward in a proactive and positive way. And I'm a great believer that, particularly in times of geopolitical conflict like we're in now, it's very prudent to have some assets outside the system if you can. Now, if you don't own real estate and you have the majority of that debt paid down, because that would be one really important thing to have, and obviously that's only a very small percentage of society that have a home and not much debt attached to it. But that would be number one, if possible. Number two would be to have some cash outside the system. There's a lot of talk right now that there could be fractures in the global banking system. We've seen over the last 48 hours some significant jitters in the in the stock market, not just the ASX, but in the US stock market as well. Central Bank of Japan has increased their interest rates, which has got many, many people who were, leveraged long in Japan, investors that are now selling up and trying to create liquidity to be able to pay back their debts. So there's we've got global wars going on right now. So all of this stuff means that you and I need to be awake, educated, prudent, and moving forward. So gold and silver are really important to have an allocation to that you can touch, that you can hold, that you can keep in a safe place, that you can get to. Me, myself, I like to ensure that I've got gold coins because they're easily exchangeable. So if we have a situation where the banking system goes down for a period where there's global conflict and they institute what's known as capital controls, where you're no longer able to withdraw money from the bank, or the banking system gets shut down for a period of time. A lot of people think this can't happen, but it's happened before. And given everything that's going on in the world right now, and the fact that the banks actually don't have our money, if we all go to the bank at the same time to try and withdraw our money, guess what? They can't provide it, because what we have is a fractional reserve banking system. And so, they lend more than they have, which means that our money is not there. And so a lot of people don't realize is that when they put their money in the bank, that we are now accredited to the bank. Doesn't mean that it's our God-given right to be able to access our money anymore. We essentially sign over custody of our money to the bank, and the bank, under certain conditions, is not obliged to return that money. And so these are the things that you begin to unravel as you begin to become more educated in this global financial space. And anybody who thinks Australia is immune really needs to do some homework, because we are very much tied in with the private Western central banking system. And typically, if America sneezes, Australia catches a cold. And so we have to be very mindful of that in this environment. So I'm a believer in some cash outside the system, some gold and silver in particular outside the system. And also I'm a great believer in Bitcoin as well. And I think that because it is truly a peer-to-peer currency that is direct, cannot be corrupted, cannot be seized, there's no issuer. It is true sovereign money, is the ability for you and I to be able to exchange one another, protect our purchasing power. If we look at the growth of Bitcoin over the last 10, 12 years, compared to other assets, it's been the best performing asset in the world. So I'm a great believer that Bitcoin is actually a phenomenal savings technology, particularly if you take custody of it yourself through a private key wallet. And so there are all these tools that we have access to, but you have to learn, you have to be wanting to do something about it. And I know that a lot of people are just struggling to survive right now. They don't have the means or the bandwidth to be able to learn or to do anything. But I think we need to be thinking more proactively than that. And so really my message today is realize there's a problem, do something about it by starting to tune into some of the educational tools that are out there. So much is available on YouTube, online in this space. And you'll begin to realize very quickly that A, we have a problem. B, you'll start to understand, what that problem is, and the reality of where we are now globally, and how in all likelihood it's only going to get worse before it gets better. And then C, that should give you the impetus to actually do something about it and to take some form of action, which I think is really important. I think anybody who's living on credit card debt right now, it's not a good place to be. It's not a good place to be. You want to do everything you can right now to try and get out of as much debt as you possibly can, as quickly as you can. And then that would be step one. And then if you've got the means to do any of those other suggestions that I've explained, then obviously it's not financial advice, but it's certainly what I'm doing. And I know a lot of people in this space who are educating themselves around the situation right now are doing the same. So I want to thank you for listening. I hope you got some value from today's video. If you got value, please give it a like. And by all means, subscribe. I want to start to build this channel and come back and share more about life, health, and freedom. This is Zane signing out. Have a great day. I'll see you really soon.